Welcome to the Jefferson Educational Society's Global Summit. My name is Ben Spagan, in case I haven't had a chance to meet you yet. I'm a Vice President at the JES. We've got several people that are going to offer some remarks to start, so I'm going to be brief tonight. I'm here to tell you a few housekeeping things. One is I'm going to ask you to take out your mobile device with me and place it in silent mode or airplane mode out of courtesy for tonight's presenter as well as your fellow patrons. But I'm also going to run through our run of shows. So we will have some welcomes, some introductions, and then we're going to hear a presentation from an expert on tonight's subject, artificial intelligence. He's going to present for a while, and then I'm going to come back on stage and join him for a fireside Q&A. And that includes your questions. So you will see our team members coming through with index cards and golf pencils in case you didn't get them already. Write your questions down. They'll collect them. They'll bring them up to me. Bonus points for great penmanship because I'm the one reading them. So appreciate that. We'll try to get through as many of those as we can before we conclude tonight's event. One of the other things I'm here to do is to remind you that we are about a third of the way through this year's Global Summit. So that means much, much more to come. We are off the rest of the week. The JES does have a couple of virtual programs you can tune into on Thursday. We'd encourage you to do that. But we encourage you to attend in person for the Global Summit starting Tuesday, October 29th. We have best-selling authors Heather Cox Richardson and Tom Nichols in conversation. In case you didn't know, Heather Cox Richardson has the most subscribed to Substack of anybody out there, 1.5 million and growing, I'm told. And Tom Nichols has the cover feature of this November edition of The Atlantic. They're going to be talking about the future and fate of democracy. And then we're right back at it again on Wednesday, October 30th, because we were so honored to, again, partner with Gannon University to feature the Dr. David Kozak Gannon Reads series, and to be able to incorporate that as part of the Global Summit, which I think continues to strengthen our excellent partnership with Gannon University. And here to welcome you to campus, I want to welcome the Dean of the College of Humanities, Education, and Social Science, Dr. Laura Linney.
Good evening, everyone. Wow, thank you for that response. Welcome to Gannon University. I'm Lori Lindley. I'm the Dean of the College of Humanities, Education, and Social Sciences here at Gannon. And we're so glad that you can join us for tonight's event. We are so proud to partner with the Jefferson Educational Society as they host the 16th Annual Global Summit Speaker Series. We value and support the mission of the Jefferson Educational Society to bring such important global programs to our community. We're grateful for our students, our faculty, and staff who attend these events and take advantage of them, like all of you. It's great to see a nice full room tonight. At Gannon, we're committed to preparing our students to become global citizens. And so this opportunity to partner just enhances that educational experience for our students, as well as bringing these great programs to the larger Erie community. As a university, we're also committed to embracing and adapting to the rapidly changing landscape of artificial intelligence, which is tonight's topic. We've adopted a number of initiatives to develop AI strategies at Gannon that advance university priorities and increase awareness of these available technologies. And we're also extremely mindful of the ethical issues as we help our faculty, students, and staff to begin to utilize AI in a secure and responsible manner. Collaborative efforts across our university have been implemented to discuss AI's impact and to learn about these tools while maintaining academic integrity. And so we're so excited to welcome tonight's speaker to learn more about the broader impacts for universities as well as for businesses and for our community. It is now my pleasure to invite to the podium Jim Stevenson, Regional Vice President of PNC Bank, to extend his welcome before tonight's event. Jim?
Thanks so much, Dr. Lindley, for your introduction. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of PNC, I'm so pleased that you could join us this evening for what we know will be both a timely and an insightful presentation on a topic impacting all of our lives. Before sharing a few high-level thoughts, I'll provide a couple of thank yous and acknowledgments. First, thanks to Gannon University for hosting us here this evening in the Yale Ballroom. As a proud second-generation Gannon alum whose two daughters both go to school here, it's always great to be back on campus. Also, I want to recognize Dr. Iwanenko and Dr. Ewing for their leadership, as well as Gannon's, in being a force for the revitalization of the downtown area. Tomorrow evening, Gannon's hosting its annual basketball tip-off dinner. After last year's historic championship run by both teams, the women's and the men's, I was hoping at the pre-reception this evening, Dr. I would share some secrets, but he wasn't willing to do so. I guess I got to show up tomorrow night to hear a little about that. Second, congratulations to Ferky and to Ben and the entire Jefferson Society team on another highly successful global summit. It's amazing what's been accomplished at the summit over the last 16 years, as Erie's been blessed with world and nationally recognized thought leaders on a wide range of critically important topics. Thanks for your leadership in helping to improve this community and take it forward. Now, PNC's been the sponsor of the Global Summit, or a sponsor, since its inception, and we're pleased to be joined by Erie Insurance this evening as a co-sponsor. The bank chooses to support the summit year after year because it provides a unique and differentiated opportunity to expose all of us to new ideas and new approaches. In addition, the summit challenges us to reconsider and re-examine some of our long-held positions, all for the betterment of the community. As an original sponsor, PNC has always been offered a robust selection of speakers to support, but now in my 9th year as regional president, I've learned that the process can be a little bit tricky. My approach has been to avoid the more controversial topics, including the upcoming presidential election, given the nearly 50-50 split in our country and my guess in our own community. The last thing in my position that I need is to upset half of our client or our employee base. To that end, how fortunate we are this evening to have a subject matter expert to discuss a topic that, regardless of our political leanings, has and undoubtedly will impact us on a go-forward basis beyond the next 2 weeks and the next 4 years. Now, this is the audience participation part. Who here in the audience follows NBA basketball? I have a couple people. Okay, that's great. So had I asked you 3 years ago about AI, well, how would you have answered that question? We only need one answer. I would have thought Allen Iverson, the answer. And then I would have said the same thing. And then if someone asked me that question and clarified it, say, no, Jim, I'm talking about artificial intelligence, not Allen Iverson, I would have thought about Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator. Shows how little I knew. Yet obviously AI is much more than the Terminator. Yes, whether we realize it or not, AI applications have exploded across our lives. And as someone with minimal technology skills, who often needs his daughter's help switching between DirecTV and a streaming service, I'm very much looking forward to tonight's presentation. With that, I'd like to invite Andy Abramczyk, Senior Vice President for Information and Technology from Erie Insurance, someone who clearly knows much more on the subject than I do, to the podium to introduce our featured speaker. Thanks, everyone, and hope you enjoy your evening.
So they told me I had about 45 minutes, so I hope you bear with me. Just kidding. So thanks, Jim. Appreciate it, and good evening, everybody. I want to extend my deep gratitude to Gannon for having us here, and for Ferky, Ben, Jake, and the entire Jefferson team on a great so far summit. Like Jim mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of hot topics that are going on, and the ability for us to all be involved and be engaged at them is critical, and tonight is no different. You're going to hear a lot of good stuff from Tristan. As Jim said, I'm Andy Abramczyk, Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Erie Insurance. Like so many others, the insurance industry has been closely studying the impact of artificial intelligence on the ways we do business, the impacts in the way we interact with our agents, our employees, our claimants, our policyholders, our community members, how we do our business, from rating to actuarial services to customer service, et cetera. AI is in the heart of it in a lot of our conversations and difficult conversations. To be very blunt, artificial intelligence is disrupting everything that we're doing today, from education to insurance to you name it. I'm very thrilled today to introduce Tristan Hoag, a leading expert on data and artificial intelligence. I spent some time with Tristan just before the session right now and learned a great deal from him and was very impressed with what he his experience and what he's been through and the things that he's trying to do to help get the world comfortable with artificial intelligence. Tristan is the regional co-chairman of BCG X, Boston Consultant Group's Tech Build and Design Unit, where he leads global efforts in building cutting-edge artificial intelligence and digital systems. He goes beyond just prototypes to transform core businesses. Tristan has led many technology and transformation projects across diverse industries such as banking, food manufacturing, pharma, and shipbuilding. As an expert in IT architecture, Tristan has helped clients build modern data environments and integrating their existing IT landscapes, translating data strategy into realistic, actionable plans, delivering high-impact areas of big data projects. I know that's a lot, and it may be confusing to some, but thankfully, Tristan's going to be here to synthesize what all that means. Please join me in a warm Jefferson Global Summit welcome to Tristan Hoag.
Andy, thank you. And Jim, thank you. And Gannon, thank you. This is a really interesting opportunity for me. I spend most of my time on planes, flying around, walking into different client offices and trying to solve problems about what they want to do with technology. And so those discussions many times are very laser focused on a specific problem. It isn't very often I get to step back and think about where we're going with all this. What does it mean? Why are we doing this? And through the conversations earlier, we had some great conversations about what does this technology mean for people, right? Because ultimately it comes down to how you impact people. And we'll talk about that towards the end of the discussion. And what I'm going to try to do today is share with you a little bit of my experience and what we've dealt with in hundreds and hundreds of projects for organizations of every shape, size, color, industry, governments, social impact organizations, community organizations. They share some common themes. And what I'm going to walk you through is a bit of a playbook. So some of these slides are pretty dense. I apologize for that. They're not meant to be read in their entirety. They're just there to make a point. And the point will be, how do we derive value from technology? How do we have impact? And how do we do it in a way that's constructive and positive and manage our way around some of the risks and issues that are present when you roll up your sleeves and dig into this? Because one of the things I think is fascinating is this quote from Arthur Clarke, one of the greatest science fiction writers of our time. You know, some of the technology out there that is just, it's mind-blowing what it can do. What people are doing in terms of the first 6 months of this year, the big four, Meta, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft spent $200 billion on capital equipment and infrastructure. It's almost incomprehensible how much money they're putting into chips and hardware and everything else. What is going to be the payoff? What is going to be the impact? How are they going to change people's lives for the better? And you can see it every day. I mean, how many people use Waze or Google Maps, right? There is some of the most powerful technology that exists out there underlying those tools that we use every single day. Gen AI is the hot topic, but I want to not forget where we came from. AI, machine learning, machine vision, deep learning, we're all predicates to Gen AI. And you've all heard, ChatGPT and OpenAI and some of the more exciting deep fakes that are going on, and the artwork that's being created, and the articles that your students are writing, that magically happen within a couple of minutes, and they're absolutely brilliant. And it's like, how did this person generate this? Well, that's Gen AI. But let's not forget, we've made a lot of progress using traditional AI and machine learning. I'll give you an example. Restaurants, low margin business. If you look at a big restaurant chain, they can't afford sophisticated technology. You go to McDonald's, a lot of times they have a hard time investing, in a new coffee machine, right? They will wring every last drop of coffee out of that thing. So we did a project for a company that had bought 4 or 5 different restaurant chains, and we put a data platform together. We started bringing in things like sports schedules, local weather, local events, and helping them forecast demand at a store level in a way they never could before. And so if you know what the demand looks like, what can you do? I can schedule people to show up and work. I can make sure I have the right amount of hamburgers available or cheeseburgers or whatever else you happen to like. I can make sure that if I know that I'm going to have downtime, I can put offers out there and say, hey, why don't you come in? We got a 2-for-1 special on this. You move the needle 2 or 3% on the accuracy of your demand forecast, and you can drop tens of millions of dollars of efficiency to the bottom line. It's not that hard to do, but it takes work. When you think about machine learning, we did a project in COVID where we were talking about this over a little bit earlier. Beef plants. Remember we were having shortages of beef during COVID? Why? Walk into a big beef plant. Actually, I wouldn't encourage it, but you go there, they're moist, they're wet, they're cool, they stink, and they are a breeding place for viruses. So what do you think? People are getting sick, downtime, et cetera. And so the company came to us and said, how can we make our plants more efficient? How can we make sure that we can keep moving product out the door so people can get the food they need? We used machine learning and machine vision to basically scan meat, find foreign products. Guess what? That algorithm gets better and better and better every single day and never gets worse. So there are things you can do using standard traditional AI machine learning. Very mundane, very practical, but has a very immediate beneficial impact. And we'll keep coming back to this because one of the core values that we have within BCG is you always have to start with the end in mind. What is the value or the impact you're trying to derive? How much is that worth? How can I move quickly to get a little bit of it so I can see if it's working and how it works, and then pivot and evolve the whole agile process? So thinking through the end and what you're trying to accomplish and where you're going to drive value is the key to almost everything, and we'll come back to that. Now let's talk a moment about Gen AI, because that is the hot topic right now. That's driving the massive investments that are going on in the market, and they have captivated the minds of institutions all over the world. Remember, Gen AI in one way really frustrated our business last year. We probably did over 300 fully invested phase zeros, where clients said, can you come talk to us about this and spend a couple of weeks thinking through how might we apply Gen AI tools to our business. We don't want to pay you for that. We'll pay you if you actually do something. So we did hundreds and hundreds of projects for free, basically exploring where is the value and how might you be able to use it and what are the issues and how hard will it be. Very, very frustrating, when you're having to pay the bills and making sure people are fully utilized and everything. But we realized there is a bigger picture here. There is a bigger opportunity. We need to get in the door and we need to figure this out because it's moving exceptionally quickly. And what is so different about it? What's so unique about Gen AI is just the massive amount of information that exists behind the models. Trillions and trillions and trillions of tiny little data points that basically create this massive information that no individual could possibly ever pull together at once. You can't possibly know the human compendium of everything about a particular topic, but now You can pull up ChatGPT, you can pull up Microsoft Copilot, you can pull up other tools, and you basically have extraordinary amounts of information at your fingertips if you ask the right questions. Right? And that's a whole nother question about how do you do that. But what it has allowed people to do is all new levels of synthesis of information out there, new levels of creativity, because you can run possibilities through these models over and over and over again at very little cost to see what might work, what might not work. And many of you have seen Midjourney and other tools like that, where I can basically say, give me a picture of my house in the evening during a sunset in the style of Salvador Dali, and you'll get this brilliant piece of artwork. And it's like, how did I do that? I know nothing about art, but here I go. And so it's fascinating how these tools are enabling people to do things that they never could do before. And that's a bit of a challenge at times. And last of all, from a reasoning perspective, what it's allowing people to do is tap into the expertise and knowledge of people that have gone before in a way that you couldn't. I can ask very, very complicated questions of some of these tools and then come back with a very well thought out, very reasoned answer. And I can ask it to explain its reasoning so I can learn from the reasoning as well. Extremely powerful. Do we know how to tap into and use all of that? No. Are there potentially risks? Absolutely. And we'll come back to that. So my strong opinion is, while Gen AI is absolutely fantastic, let's not forget about all the tools that are out there. Yeah, simple little things. We used machine vision and machine learning to watch meatballs as they're going into the oven through a conveyor. Are they right shape? Are they the right size? Are they right temperature? Because you can use thermal cameras. When they come out of the oven, are they right shape, right size, et cetera? When they go into the freezer, are they right shape? You can use AI, machine learning, and these tools to do incredibly mundane things, but have very important value from a safety, from a health, from a productivity, from an efficiency perspective. So we think of these tools and having impact in three ways. And we have a really strong opinion around the right way to go is, and I'll tell you that in a second. The first way you can use these tools is basically you can deploy a tool out to the mass audience and say, good luck with that. And what you'll end up with is a whole bunch of very interesting anecdotes. Party tricks, I like to call them. So I use ChatGPT, and I go in and I put it in, and I was trying to create names for a house. And I came up with all these great names. I kept tweaking the algorithm and everything, come back with them. And in the end, it was kind of interesting. I used it to write a letter or an email. And those are neat. I like to call them party tricks. They're efficiencies. And they're wonderful and they're great and they make for great conversation. But it's tough to measure the impact. We think about deploying these tools in a series of use cases or examples that align into a process or a function. And you do it in a logical order. So when I do one, I learn a little bit. When I do two, I learn a little bit more and I make a little more impact. When I do three, I scale the impact and I learn a little bit more and I expand. When I do four, maybe I start to expand to a different unit or a different enterprise or a different product. The idea being, I make incremental tactical investments that I can learn from, I can show an immediate impact, I can avoid failure because it's small and bite-sized, I can actually get the job done in a reasonable amount of time. And over time, what I can do is I can look and say, you know what, this process or this function is 20 times more efficient or 10 times more productive or this much better in terms of customer service. But I can measure the impact, I can see the value, and I can then go back to our executive team or our board or whoever and say, you know what, there is real value by deploying these kinds of tools. And so we believe reshaping functions is really the correct path for most organizations. But there's one other, and I'll show you an example in a moment, where you can invent all new offerings. Because like we were talking, you can do things with these tools that could never been done before. So there are ways to rethink businesses, rethink products, or rethink services to create all new ways of touching and servicing your customers. Let's give you a couple examples. So in the deploy world, you can use the ChatGPT. Turn it on for the enterprise, keep it behind the firewall, lock the data off so you manage some of your risk, but allow people to experiment and play and become more efficient and have access to more information, more tools, more logic than they had before. Very difficult to manage, very difficult to measure the impact, but you can measure the cost because you're going to pay for it. Reshape, one example, is we're using GitHub Copilot or Amazon Q to basically do legacy software migration from old platforms to new platforms. And basically, we had a developer and sat down and said, well, it's going to take 52 weeks to migrate this old application to this new platform. It took 2, because I could read the code, I could transform the code and generate it, maybe 70% accuracy. I could document all the requirements, I could document how the code worked, I could automatically generate the test cases, I could automatically review the compliance requirements and map them. So a bunch of the work that would take weeks and weeks and weeks of hard work to do, cut down to 2 weeks. That unlocks the ability for some clients to move old platforms to new platforms, retool the process, very significant efficiency, very easy to measure and manage the impact. We had a different client that created a virtual beauty consultant. I love this example. Gen AI tools, and basically you pull it up on your phone, you take a look, and you can experiment using their beauty products and how they're going to work for you. You find the ones you want, snap a picture, send it to them, and you can automatically buy the various products. So all new channel, all new way of being able to experiment with makeup. You can very easily measure and manage the impact, the cost, et cetera. And there's all kinds of new use cases and versions of this kind of model that's being developed right now. Super exciting, but there are risks associated with it. You've got to make sure that you train those models with a wide variety of people and backgrounds and ages and race and gender and everything else to make sure that you're not leading to bias, et cetera. But we'll come back to that in a minute. So how do you do this? So when we go in, remember I said we did about 300 plus of these phase zeros. How do you get started if you're an organization that wants to start to play in this space? Well, the first thing we say is you got to set the strategy. Think about what you want to do. Understand where you're going as a business or an organization, what impact you want to have, what's most important to you, and what kind of things could you do to advance that cause using technology. Brainstorm, experiment, outline the value, outline the risk. The second thing is build a team. Build a small team, a center of excellence that understands and is going to be your focal point for taking advantage of the technology, deploying it, working through it, and dealing with those issues. Third thing is you've got to put the right governance model in place in risk management. We'll come back to that because there are real painful risks and penalties that exist. In the EU, I believe, if I remember correctly, it's between 3 and 7% of revenues. If they find that you've used AI, machine learning, Gen AI in a way that will disadvantage people, whether it's through using their data in incorrect ways or through bias, et cetera, 3 to 7% of your revenues. That is a big, big fine, real risk with taking something like that. So you got to make sure you have the right structure in place so you do it the right way. The fourth thing is, well, which partners are you going to use and what platforms and how are you going to get the data? And we'll talk about that in a moment because there are so many choices out there. You want to go with Google or OpenAI or Meta or Intel, et cetera. There's more choices than you can imagine at the moment. And so it takes a little bit of work to think through which one's the right one for you and who do you sign up and how do you get started? Because one of the things I hear the most is, well, it's moving so fast. How do I make bets on this, right? Or should I just wait? Because once the players kind of sort themselves out, but that, in reality, you need to start to develop the muscle, start to develop the instinct, learn where the opportunities are and how to play the game. So maybe you make small bets, right? Don't bet the farm. Don't put, all your chips on one particular vendor, but start to get in the game and start to play. And the last piece, though, and I actually think this is the most important, is how do you engage your people? And we'll talk more about this in the end, but this is a people game in the end. It's how do you change the business? How do you change what your customers, how do you change what your business partners do? Because every tool you put in place is going to have an impact on someone. And thinking through what that means and how you enable them and train them and incent them and guardrail them to do the job in the right way, super, super important. So those are the 5 things that we think are important to setting up your approach and how you might take this on. So here's the fun part. Where do I get started? How do I create? We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of what we call use cases, which are examples of different things you can do with AI, machine learning, Gen AI. You can pull those together. They exist out there. There are many software companies and service firms that will come and say, here are the 3 things we can do for you using these tools. But first step is to inventory those and think about them and filter them down to some sort of short-term priorities that you're going to be able to implement quickly, see a real impact, and then be able to learn, how do I take the next step from there? You don't have to solve world hunger with the first use case, right? It's about getting started, learning, and advancing very quickly. The Center of Excellence, super important. For many organizations, this is tough. Remember, I was talking about the restaurant company a little while ago. There is not one data scientist out there that was really excited about going to work for a restaurant company, right? They want to work for technology firms, or they want to work for the big banks, or the big aerospace and engineering firms, right? They want to go where the action is. So how do you create a center of excellence and people that are become deeply expert and conversant in these technologies and how you make these technologies work, no matter what industry or sector or part of society you're in? It takes some real thought to build those skills, to build that team, to stand them up, to incent them, and allow them to take the necessary risks from a career perspective that might be unique. Like, I remember I had left BCG a while ago and I went to work for Discover. And we had this big program underway, and I pulled about a dozen people out of their line jobs, and they came to work in this nucleus of this team to run this big program. And they all had the same question. And the same question was, well, I have my goals and objectives. I report to this person over here. At the end of the year, I'm going to get evaluated on these goals and objectives, and I'm up for the next step in my career. How does this thing over here help me do that? How do I step off the linear vertical career path to be able to go try something like this, right? There's rewards, there's opportunity, there's relationships, there's visibility. There are a number of things you can do to make it worthwhile to take this talent and give them an opportunity they'll be excited to go pursue. But it takes some thought, and you might have to get pretty creative to figure out, how do I put that team together? So let's talk for a moment about the platforms out there. So how do you think about which one do you choose? And we're not going to go into all the depths of which cloud platform do you want, or which model, or what tooling. But suffice it to say, there are a lot of choices, and they're moving super, super quickly, right? You have 4.0, then you got I.O., and then blah, 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 and they're all moving. It's like, it's almost impossible to stay on top of the progress because they're moving so quickly at this point. So I think the way we think about it is try to stick with tools and platforms that are relatively close to what you know. You know, most organizations, whether it's Erie or PNC, et cetera, you've got cloud technologies in place today to some degree. You've got tools and data and things you're doing already today. So try to stick somewhat close to home so you minimize the number of variables that you have to come up to speed on when you roll out this project. It's a lot easier to take a new tool, put it on the platform you already know how to run, than go start from scratch with an all-new platform because it's sexy, it's cool, it's in the headlines. Stay close to home, use it to move quickly, to advance, and to minimize your risk. The vendors are selling incredible hype right now. I was with one client not too long ago. We were talking to the head of customer support, and we were talking about some Gen AI tools and customer service. He's like, I want to get rid of 100% of my customer service team. Like, who's going to actually know how to service customers to program into the model? Right? Okay, so the level of hype about the opportunity out there is kind of we're at the top of the hype curve right now, or pretty close to it. But there is some truth in what they're talking about. There are anecdotes of very important impact to companies, to society, et cetera. Like, I can't live without Waze and Google Maps, right? It's made my life a ton easier. It doesn't matter where I am. I can get somewhere relatively quickly, whether I'm on a bike or I'm in a car or I'm walking. Some of the tools and capabilities have become ubiquitous, for us. And I think that's going to happen with many of these tools. You're not even going to know you're using some of these tools when you're using them. So the opportunity is really out there, but as you think about setting up the ones for your organization, let's start with a big goal in mind, but let's get very practical with how we get started. So who's doing it? We've done a survey of about 2,000 companies recently, and what's fascinating is, you can lay it out on a spectrum. There are some companies, particularly those, I think I've got it on the next slide, that are focused on operations, customer supports that are ahead of the curve right now, because the use cases are very clear, they're very tangible, and keeping people employed and keeping them happy and dealing with turnover is painful for some firms. And so they take the easy route. I'm just going to automate as much of that as possible. May or may not be the right answer for their customers, but it's a very low-hanging fruit, very easy, straightforward opportunity they can justify with some nickels and dimes. And so you'll see many of the leading edge companies in technology, in banking, financial services, are investing in call center, customer support, operations, use cases right now, and seeing very, very rapid impact. Maybe not 100%, but they might see 10, 15, 20, 30%, efficiencies, which they can redeploy those people sometimes to more complex questions, right? So that's where I think much of the benefit. It's not about just eliminating people, it's redeploying them to more impactful things. So this is an eye chart, but I think it's actually the most important chart that we have. When we did that restaurant case about 8 years ago, we sat down and we measured the effort that it took to get that client through the 18-month journey. 10% of the effort was actual data science. It was people writing algorithms to estimate, what demand would look like, and then doing the algorithms and how much meat and bread and everything else that I'd need. 20% of that work was hardcore technology work. It's plugging the data pipelines in, creating the data platform, mastering the data, creating a tool that a store manager can use to see the forecast and make the adjustments to inventory and staffing, et cetera. 70% of the work was changing the way the business operated. 70%. You might say, but it's so obvious. These tools, they're so easy to use. I mean, we had human-centered design and we had brilliant experience. I mean, the tools were beautiful. It still took 70% of the work to change the way the business operated. You might want to ask, well, why is it so hard? Well, ask a store manager. They know their store better than anybody. They don't want what some stupid tool is going to tell them. They don't trust the tool. They know their experience. All of a sudden, a couple store managers started figuring out this tool really worked. So they started generating more sales and their costs went down and they generated a pile of profit. Then we realized their bonuses were going crazy. So corporate should probably retain some. So now you have to rethink the incentive model and the compensation schemes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes the impact of what you're doing can be so profound, you need to start rethinking things you never thought you would have to start to rethink. So what I would caution you to do is as you get into these efforts, It's all about people. It's about the impact you're going to have. How do you engage them? How do you incent them? How do you guardrail what they're going to do to make sure you don't create real issues? And it's all about psychology, right? It's people, some don't want to change. And we have a group of people here that probably are out there right now typing into ChatGPT what some of these numbers mean, et cetera. But there's a lot that don't want to change. How do you incent them and get them to change? Make them aware, teach them, et cetera. Second thing is enablement. How do you give them the training, the coaching, the access to support that they're going to need to make sure to be able to execute using the new tooling and the new approach you gave them. And last of all, sometimes there's just plain old psychological cultural resistance. I don't want to do it because I know my business, I've done it this way forever. Why do I need to change? And there's a set of tools and ways to go about dealing with that. But super, super important, because you can build the greatest tool out there, and if people don't use it, what's the point? So we've got a few simple rules how to drive adoption. And you know, it's all about thinking about how these tools become a natural part of your daily work. Like I said, we use Waze, we use Google, we use some of these tools every single day. They've just become a part of our life. You know, it's super, thinking through that and making sure that you do the testing and learning and observation and see how people use them to make sure that the little impediments, the little frustrations go away and make it easy and elegant to use. I think the other thing is, how do you drive adoption? How do you measure it? How do you get out there? How do you celebrate the wins? How do you pump up the people that are doing it right and put them, you know, on the pedestal and give them a platform to shout and scream about the wonderful things they're doing and the impact they're having? And slowly, how do you pull the crutches? Right? How do you pull the old tools out? Remember, we did a technology project years ago. They had thousands of reports. And they're like, you cannot decommission that system until all those reports are gone. I said, okay. So we shut off all the reports and just waited until people started bitching, right? And then we figured out which reports people actually used, and we focused on just those reports. You know, sometimes a little bit of common sense, you can simplify the problem. But thinking about how to help people along the journey, super important. But this stuff comes with a risk, right? Unbeknownst to you, you don't know where these models are trained. You don't know what data is behind some of these models. You know, we built a test, a car configurator for a company. So you can go in, you can configure your car and order a new car. Well, the problem is people could type in things like, how do I create a car bomb? Right? Anybody want to be liable for putting that up on your website? I don't think so, right? So there are real risks associated with some of these tools, and taking time, having a process, having a policy about how you're going to approach and govern and manage your institution according to those risks, super, super important. You know, it's not just risks of people Googling something or using the tool to, but it's also, do I misrepresent my services? Do I use your data in a way that's untoward to take advantage of you, right? Do I build bias into the tool and start to skew towards certain populations? A lot of different ways that you can get caught up. And it takes time and care and attention to make sure that you sidestep some of those issues. So I think there's 4 things you can do. One is you make sure you have your guidelines and your policy set, and that takes a little bit to do. They're out there, you can get help, you can publish them. Second thing is you got to have a governance model, and one that has teeth, with people that care, that look into this on a regular basis. There's some technical guardrails you can put in. So for example, you can't use certain terms in your searches and in your conversations. And last of all, it's got to just be part of your DNA, right? It's got to be part of the culture. It's got to be something people care about every single day. Otherwise, you won't execute, and people won't believe you, and you won't be credible. So where are we going with all this? The idea is minimize the effort, maximize the impact. You know, there are things we can do now we never could have done before. And we can do them at scale in a way that in some cases can be much more affordable. We can read x-rays, we can read diagnostic diagrams, we can do drug testing, I can look at research and create new compounds in ways we never could before. The impact we can have on humanity, on people, and on our businesses and our community, it's extraordinary, right? But it takes entering the game with the right mindset, with the right intent, with the right team of people, with the right mission that you want to go on, and with a whole heck of a lot of energy and support. Because many of these are not easy, and you'll run into roadblocks, you'll run into dead ends, you'll run into walls. But if you keep the faith and you keep working, and you have a great team around you, and you're excited about what you're doing, you can accomplish some pretty amazing things. So with that, Ben, you want to chat a little bit?
Ladies and gentlemen, how about another round of applause for Mr. Tristan Hoag? Absolutely fascinating, and we covered a lot there, and we have a lot more to unpack. And already I've got some questions from the audience. They're terrific. Keep them coming. Our team's going around with index cards. I think this person was anticipating the last slide we just saw, the minimize the toil, maximize the success. They're curious what you see in AI right now that is most valuable but poses the least amount of risk. So what right now with AI is most valuable, least amount of risk?
So I think when you look at some of the use cases I talked about, restaurants, demand forecasting, store labor optimization, et cetera, to me there's relatively low risk in those opportunities. You can think of AI machine generated as two. You got the math world and you got the creative world. I think the math world, depending upon the use cases, there's relatively less risk. I think in this new world, with the creativity, with creating content, with creating pictures, with listening to conversations and turning them into responses, we're at the very, very early stages of trying to understand how that's all going to work and how it's all going to play out. So inherently, there's more risk there, but there's also tremendous opportunity.
So I love that you started with magic, and you started with a quote from a science fiction writer. When did Tristan Hoag love the magic or discover to learn the magic? When were you drawn to this?
So my very first, it's not exactly an AI issue, but my first client project that I did back in late 1987 was for New Orleans Airport. And at the time I was working for the old Arthur Anderson and Company, the technology division, and there was an opportunity at the airport to install a new computer system to drive all the operations of the airport. And they looked all over the firm, and there was only one person that knew anything about package software and digital computers, and they said, "You're it." Now, I looked like I was 12 years old. I really didn't know very much at all. And so I was getting ready to go down to New Orleans, and they called and said, "Well, it's delayed." I'm like, Mardi Gras is coming up. I'm going to have an apartment. I'm going to be there for 6 months. This is going to be the greatest thing ever. And it kept getting delayed. And so on Ash Wednesday, they called me and said, "We need you down here on Sunday." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? The entire city is going to be closed for months. Nobody's going to do it." But that said, I flew down. And that Sunday afternoon, my manager, Chalmers Brothers, picked me up, and he walked me down the hall, and he opened a closet. And when he opened the closet, there's a bunch of boxes there. And I'm looking, I'm like, he's like, "There it is." I'm like, "There what is?" He's like, "That's the computer." And I'm like, "Okay, what do you want me to do with it?" He's like, "Well, you got to unpack it and put it together and set the system up for the airport." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" So, I started that night, and I unpacked things, and I started hauling, and I'm plugging it in the wall. And back then, you had to load the tapes, you had to load the operating system, you had to basically write all the printer routines. Everything had to be done from scratch. And I had no clue what I was doing, but I had this giant set of binders that I'd photocopied, put in my luggage, and took with me. which probably broke some sort of publishing or copyright rule, and I had a good friend on speed dial. And at the end of the day, after a couple of really painful weeks, the system came up. I had cables manufactured that I stole a printer from that was in the back office of another group, and I got this thing working. And it was a defining moment in my life where I figured, like, if you put up enough energy and you ask for help and you get a few questions, you can do some pretty interesting things. And I got to see how the whole thing works, how it all comes together, and how the applications sit on top of the data, sit on top of the operating systems, and on top of, the configuration and how you set up security and everything. And it just excited me that, there's a whole world here that you can really do some pretty cool things if you just put a little extra attention in and try.
Do you worry at all that younger generations now are missing out on something, not having had an experience like that? Because I think of the first time I got a cell phone, it came with a phone book size manual, and now you open a smartphone, there is no manual, right? We're born with the tech in our hands. Do you think current generations are missing something by not having that origin point experience?
So one of the fun things you get to know, but you talk to anybody from BCG, they always say, well, there's 3 ways to think about this. There's always 3. I don't know why, but there's always 3. So I think of there's 3 kinds of kids, right? There's one set of kids that are going to the hobby shops and they're creating their own machines and they're loading everything up, and they are deep into gaming and they're creating these super high performance machines, and they get this stuff. There's a second set of kids that use their phones and are dialed in a way that it's pretty amazing to watch, right? And they are not writing the code, they're not writing the algorithms, but they're using the tools in incredibly sophisticated ways. And there's a third set of kids that are just left behind, right? And we were talking about this, in the session up front. When I think about, I've lived for the last 37 years in Chicago, in the Chicagoland area. And, we've got kids where their whole high schools, where not a kid can read and write at level, right? That is a problem. Those kids are being left behind, not just from technology, but from a whole host of things. So I do think there's different tranches or different cohorts of kids out there that are some are being advantaged, some are taking advantage, and others are just lost.
So I want to turn to BCG for a second and ask, because we talked about the impact on business consumers, now we've talked about the impact on youth, but let's dial back a sec to talk about the impact of technology, the advancements around artificial intelligence on the company you work for, Boston Consulting Group. How have things changed recently over your 2 tours of duty now? Because you left for a while and now you're back. How have things changed?
Yeah, so I'm a boomerang. They say you get to leave BCG once. Well, I'll get to leave twice, so that's something. I was with the firm from 2005 to 2011. And back then, it was a classic management consulting firm. We'll look at your financials, we'll figure out, which businesses are doing well and which ones aren't. We'll look at your pricing strategy. We'll look at your operating model. We'll reorg your company. We'll do like highfalutin management consulting stuff. They didn't want to touch technology with a 10-foot pole because everybody knows 95% of the time large technology projects fail. And because of that, you don't want a client relationship to go bad, so nobody do it. So, I spent 7 years flying all over the world doing projects wherever I could find them. And, I had kids in middle school at the time, and I'm like, this isn't gonna work. So that's when I left and I went to Discover for 5 years. And I came back in 2016 because lo and behold, they figured out technology did matter and had launched 3 businesses within the BCG fold: Gamma, which was data science; Platinian, which was technology and architecture; and Digital Ventures, which was building startups and new businesses. And I came back and it was a whole new world. And it was off to the races because every strategy, every decision, every issue, there was always a technology implication. And so for the past 6 years, the business has changed so dramatically that probably 40 to 45% of all the work we do deeply involves technology today. And BCG X, for example, which is our technology arm, we represent about 10% of the firm's revenues in total. So we went from being a rounding error maybe 10 years ago to now it's probably one of the most important things we do.
And I think that speaks to the adaptability and how fast things are moving. Let's go back to consumers for a second, because you were just on a panel at Microsoft, and they were asking you, how do we help design products for our consumers, for our clients? What should we be thinking about? What did you tell Microsoft?
So this was fascinating. Don't ask me how I ended up in this panel. They must have somehow let me slip in the side door. But Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, asked the chairman and CEOs of the top systems integration, their biggest partners, to do a session with him and talk about what their clients were doing with all this AI, machine learning, Gen AI technology, and how it would affect so what Microsoft could do, because they were spending billions and billions of dollars, how can they best spend that money to help their clients? And so, one by one, the different KPMG and Accenture and Deloitte and all these firms, they go and they offer their ideas. And it came around, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to raise my hand and speak. And so I said, well, we've got a different view. He's like, well, what do you mean you have a different view? I said, well, what you just heard is that each of these firms want to deploy your technology across the entire community of your clients. They want to take Copilot and they want to roll it out for everybody. So everybody in HR uses it, or everybody in finance uses it, et cetera. And I said, I think that's the wrong way to go. I said, we at BCG believe you should start in a very focused manner. You should focus on a function that's going to matter. You should solve real problems quickly, build enthusiasm and support, and show a return, and scale that impact, and then pivot to other functions. And he said, I really like that idea. He's like, it's different than what the other, and we went on and we talked about it a little bit more, because what he realized is, if you're the CEO of SAP, or you're the CEO of Microsoft, what is one of the biggest problems you have? One of the biggest problems you have is you may sell $1 million worth of software, but it takes $10 million from a systems integrator to implement it. And when that project goes wrong, you get blamed, not the systems integrator, because they've got a statement of work and it's all the software problem. The second thing is, because it takes so long to get the value out, it makes it harder and harder for you to sell your product, because the cost of your product's not $1 million, it's $11 million. And the value is somewhere way down the road. So Microsoft, SAP, Salesforce, et cetera, are really thinking about how to apply this use case driven, get to value fast, functional change, scale once you understand the impact, about how to do it, because it fits their model much, much better.
And I think that there's got to be value to that, opposed to just throwing things against the wall and hoping something's going to stick, or showing up with a big sack of new tools and hoping some of them are going to work. That more strategic, focused approach. How do you find it? Exhilarating or exhausting trying to keep up with the pace and evolution of this?
Well, like I said, I used to look like I was 12. I don't anymore.
Well, you look like you're 13 now,
Thank
so
you.
maybe a year. But exhilarating or exhausting, because this is moving fast.
It's both. So what I like to talk about, so within BCG is a firm of 32,000 people. We've got about 3,000 within BCG, our core tech team. So we're a tiny fraction of the size of a 750,000 Accenture or 760,000 person Deloitte. But what I like to say is what we've built, and apologize, I love to use military metaphors, my son's in the Army, et cetera, but I believe we've built the special forces of tech. We've hired the top 1% to 2% of technicians out there. We've trained them to work in these ways around being very focused, very specific on the most mission critical problems that clients have, in a highly ambiguous way in small teams. And then we forge those skills over and over and over again. So you get these really, really special people. And I had this conversation, in fact, I just had it last Monday. I was in New York talking to a bunch of new project leaders, and they were talking about sustainability, right? How do you do this job and be able to, and I said, you know what? I said, if you want to change the world, if you want to make massive impact, if you want to really help clients with their most important problems, it's not easy. That is not a 9-to-5 job. It comes with a toll. But on the flip side, the benefits are extraordinary. I get to work with some of the smartest, brightest, most exciting, most motivated people in the world. You do get to earn a decent living by doing it. And I can tell you, it is no problem getting up in the morning because it's just so exciting to be able to work with people on things that matter. And so, yeah, it's tiring at times, but at the same time, when you're tired, it just means you need to kind of get up, have another cup of coffee, and go at it because what you're doing is important.
And so perhaps less important, at least to me, because I don't use apps to bet on sports, but it's important to somebody here wondering the ethics of using AI when it comes to betting on sports apps. Where do we see this influencing it?
Boy, that's a great question. I gotta say, I have no experience in that arena.
I've got zero.
I know it's an area that, so within BCG, we have guardrails on what we'll work on, what we won't work on. We have a whole responsible AI governance model where every single case or proposal we do goes through a process to evaluate, is there risk here? And if there is risk, then we're gonna elevate that. We're gonna have our experts look at it, make sure that we have the right controls in place, or say, you know what, we can't do that work. So in this particular case, we would not do work. We would not work with clients that want to kind of game the system in that sort of way. So I'd say for me personally and for the firm that I work with, we would not engage or work on those types of activities.
So you've got the guardrails. The Biden administration passed an executive order to try to get out ahead of this. Should there be universal guardrails around artificial intelligence? And if so, who's got the hand on the wheel for that?
Well, that's a gigantic question, and I think you're right. There's a role for governments to play. There's a role for industry organizations to play. We've got a lot of metaphors from the banking and financial services world about how to control risk and manage risk and deal with complex issues like this. And I think it's going to be a series of safety nets that some are at the government level, some are at the industry level, some are at the technology firm level, and some are at the individual company level that all have to weave together to be able to create the right kind of structures and frameworks to protect consumers and companies.
So we're sitting on a college campus right now, so it's hard not to think about students, education, academia. This person, I didn't see this on the news, they did today. Parents are suing their son's school for accusing him of using AI to complete a project. In academics, can AI be just a tool or just a way to cheat?
Wait, so the parents are suing the school versus having a conversation with their son or daughter?
So I don't have the context. We're going to go on the fact that there's a lawsuit, parents suing a school, perhaps a child. I guess the way I would interpret that is the student used it as a tool. The school is saying
got
they
caught
cheated.
Got it.
And now the parents are filing a lawsuit. I think that shows the complexity of this and how messy it is for a tool. But your take on that, Tristan?
So we're having these conversations in not just this venue, but many others. And it goes beyond just the use of technology. I had mentioned my son is in the Army. He went to West Point. And West Point has a very, very strict honor code that they've had for many, many. Thou shalt not lie, cheat, steal, or tolerate anyone that does, except in certain situations. And there's a real debate to be had, bunch of football players on spring break got in some real trouble. You may remember this issue from about 2 years ago. And nobody knows whether they were dismissed or whether they were allowed to continue their career or separate with no financial penalty. And, I think there's a real question around ethics, around penalties associated with violations of ethics. And it's going to be, there's probably no one right answer. And in this, there's probably a ton of nuance here in terms of what happened with this particular individual and family. But I think there's going to be a lot of questions, and it'll be a topic that we probably talk about a lot more than we have.
So, do you have a red line for employees? Let's take it out of the classroom and into the careers, into real life. For an employee using generative AI to do a job, is there a stopping point in which you say, this is no longer human production that I'm hiring you to do, that lacks human intuition? What's your red line?
We have to disclose it. This is a very, very real issue because we have clients where, in fact, we were talking this on the break with a couple of people. My sister-in-law works for one of the large banks. They have decided they are not using any AI, machine learning, Gen AI tools at the moment because they are not comfortable with the risks, they don't understand them, and they're not sure how to stay out of trouble. So we're not doing it right now. If I have a team that's serving that client, we cannot be using those tools to serve that client. So we have to be able to understand our client's issues and our client's posture and disclose and calibrate what we're going to do and how we're going to do it with that particular client. Now, we are investing huge amounts in tooling to help our consultants become better. You know, I think I'd mentioned about the software translation where it goes 52 weeks down to 2 weeks. Well, I can have people do industry studies now in a fraction of the time. You know, don't go and please start renegotiating contracts if you happen to use us anywhere. But we have people, we can do more faster with less and probably do it better now because we have access to much more information and knowledge.
So let's take it out of that workplace into a different sector. This person is thinking about the film industry, and I'm thinking about the example you gave in the presentation of Draw My House and In Fall at Sunset, inspired by Salvador Dali. So it clearly creates something and produces a work of art. What about film? What about other industries that are impacted by this? Screenwriting. You know, write me the 6th season of Breaking Bad right now. And
So I think I think that's just it's another step in the technology evolution of Hollywood and media. I mean, we've had CGI for quite a while. There's, you know, digital editing tools, et cetera. You know, we've learned how to adapt to that. We understand how to use and recognize prior use, right? And stand on the shoulders of giants with patents and copyrights, et cetera. How we incorporate that into the new tools and how we govern it to make sure that people do it appropriately, there's going to be a lot of work to do to figure that out. But I think it's a step. It's not as revolutionary in some ways as people think. We've had these challenges before. We just need to reapply our learning from them to this new model.
So where would you rank right now the U.S. in keeping up with generative AI? Where do you project it's going to be in 5 years? The audience wonders, in a global conversation, where's the U.S. right now? Where do you think the U.S. ranks in 5 years?
Well, I think I think in many ways we are way, way ahead. We have the U.S. just, when you get a chance to work with non-U.S. companies, there tends to be a little bit of what are they doing over there? Because generally, the people running our organizations are entrepreneurs that are willing to take risks, that are willing to invest, and there's so much pressure from the market and competition, et cetera, that they can't stay behind, right? And if you think about many of the biggest tech companies in the world are here, they're advancing the ball, they're moving things forward. I mean, I don't know if you saw what Musk did the other day, but they announced they had implemented 100,000 NVIDIA GPUs in 2 weeks. And the CEO of NVIDIA is like, this is not possible. There's no other firm in the world that could possibly have created the engineering and scale and power and cooling and everything, and somehow they did it. But that's the kind of energy and enthusiasm and creativity we have here in the US that I think will always keep us a step ahead of what's happening around the world. Now, will there be innovations and really cool, exciting applications of technology? Yes, but I think what's happening in the US, it's a freight train right now, and literally hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. It's almost incomprehensible to think the amount of investment that's going in.
Well, I think that speed, that velocity, the pace of it, I think that perhaps goes back to some of that psychological barrier of we can't think of something we've seen moving this fast with this heavy of an implication or impact. Have we? Have we seen a comparable in human development and technology that we can say we've been here before, we're going to navigate through change, or are we in unprecedented times?
You've got all the big picture questions. Normally I focus on like, how am I going to take a few dollars out of store labor, right?
How are you going to take a few dollars out of store labor?
There are technologies we use every single day that have been pretty groundbreaking. I mean, the phone that you have right there, the amount of processing power and capability on that phone is incomprehensible to what existed 5, 6, 7 years ago. Remember, when I started my career, we didn't have cell phones. I remember the first one I had, the giant brick. And I was doing work for AT&T. I'm in Morristown, New Jersey, and I'm like, I can't get a signal, and I'm next to the firm that runs the wireless network. Right? And now I've got the processing power of the world at my fingertips. So I think, yes, there are exemplars of what's happening, whether it's phones, it's cloud technology, it's ubiquitous wireless networks, that one by one they've put another brick in the foundation of the platforms we're going to be able to use.
With the amount of data out there now, how do you help businesses sort through it so that it's useful? This person is worried about the noise, just that there's so much data out there to process. How do you help them navigate that to know what to actually look for now that we have so much to track?
So that takes real work, right? And that's where some of the magic, really happens with the teams. There's lots of tools you can use to sift through data and look for signals and false signals, et cetera. But in the end, that's what a data scientist, that's what the engineer, that's what the product manager, that's their role, is to look at what's going on, try to understand what matters, dig into the threads that they can pull to really make something happen. And that's where we're always going to need human ingenuity and experience. Right? Because you just can't turn everything over to the tool and hope it runs. Somebody's got to have the intelligence to tell the tool what to do, to understand how it's doing it, to point it in the right direction. When it starts to go wrong, how do I put a guardrail in to keep it back, and how do I make any adjustments? Because remember, everything we're doing is going to be obsolete tomorrow. We've got to keep advancing it. So it's a never-ending journey.
A lot of questions up here about fact checkers, trust but verify, making sure that we actually know the information that generative AI is gathering and producing. I think maybe people are thinking ChatGPT, if it is helping students or if it is a tool. Do we see that headed in a direction where it's not on the consumer or user to verify what's being produced, but there would be some sort of built-in mechanism? Will things get easier, or is that still on the user? We have to be our own trust but verify.
It's a great question. I think fact-checking and things, for example, looking at plagiarism. Today is an art form. Tomorrow, it'll be press the button. Because if you think about it, if everything's digitized and it's all broken down, I can run a model, have it look for that, and say, has this been done before? And if it has, right, then obviously you can point you in the direction, maybe there's something nefarious that's been happened. So I do think there'll be more and more and more controls put in place. There are services right now that institutions have that can look for plagiarism and copyrights infringement, et cetera. And I think that'll become more ubiquitous over time. But I do think there's also an intent issue that is important to think about. So, if a young person is, working through a paper and they're trying to look for ideas, there's a benefit in a way for them to look at, this compendium of knowledge that's out there and to sift through it and think about it and see what the best thinkers in the world have said about this particular topic or this particular issue. That's not a bad thing. Now, if they take that and make it their own and represent it as their own, that's an issue, right? But we've had ways of footnoting and calling out and sharing, other people's work in a responsible way. And so I think there is a point here to think about the intent and way people are using things and how they present it in a way that is honest and shows what they've done versus others done.
You talked about nefarious activity, bad actors, seeing real threats in this. What keeps you up at night?
Well, I can tell you the thing that we were talking this on a break. So we just completed this huge project, one of the biggest we'd ever done. And we're so excited. And I had told the CEO when this project it ran into some trouble, and I'd met with the CEO and I said, look, we're the only ones in the world that can do this project, and we will get it done. You have the entire resources of BCG around the world at your disposal. And we got it done. So I was like, whew. A month later, we were on stage at our Worldwide Partners meeting, and we were getting an award for this great project. And we're all like excited, and we're carrying our little trophies off, and we're proud of what we've done. That afternoon, I got a phone call saying my client had been hacked, and they basically had to pull the red lever, and they had to shut every single system down. Every connection to every third party that they had to shut it down. And so first thing I had to do was go talk to our CEO and our head of risk and say, look, this just happened. Yeah, thanks for the award, but we've got a real problem. And they're like, well, did we cause that? Did we have anything to do with it? And I said, I can't tell you right now, but we will find out very soon. And so we went through a whole process of figuring that out. And it was nothing that we had done. We had actually informed them of these vulnerabilities, and they had unfortunately not closed the door on those vulnerabilities. And they were down for 3 or 4 months. I mean, these are a couple hundred hospitals, no electronics, all paper, right? This is a big deal. That's what keeps me up at night, right? It may not be something that we did, but it's something that happens to people I care about, that I want to help, and I want to make sure they're okay, and we've got to help respond to it.
And I think about the ethics involved in your response, not your problem, but pushing it to just a little bit more and hearing the hospitals. I think about the ethics involved and wonder your point. I remember Navi Health, I think, was the contractor that United Healthcare hired to then pre-screen whether or not somebody would be approved, or pre-approved, and it's denying tens of thousands of people outright because the algorithm's wrong.
Yep.
Can we hear from you on how we fix or at least improve or are more mindful of the ethics around this, coaching businesses, organizations toward that?
Well, like I said, I think you've got to go in with a mindset of these risks are real. And it's not just something you do at the end to test, well, does the algorithm work okay? Fine, throw it in, let's try it out. You've got to design into the very beginning of the process. How do you think about covering these potential risks? How do you generate test data that creates a full portfolio of situations? How do I make sure I have a diverse set of people that are working on this and testing this, and I've got checkers to go. So every step of the way, you've got to think about dealing with risk and responsibility and potential problems from the very, very beginning.
So, Tristan Hoag, I have 2 final questions before we wrap up here, and I'll ask you to think on them. I'll say a few things to the audience, and then we will head off into the night. The 2 questions are, one, you talk often about AI. You're in the field, you're working on this. Some here are in business, some are in academia, some are interested, curious, general public. With all of the engagements that you do, what question are you tired of having to answer around artificial intelligence? And if it happened to be one of the questions asked tonight, it wasn't from the audience, it was me, I'll take all the blame. The other question I'd ask you is, what question aren't you asked enough that you wish you had a chance to talk to audiences about? Before you answer either of those, I do want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. A talk around, no doubt, a critical issue of our day, exciting, sometimes terrifying. We appreciate you being a part of this conversation. I don't know if any of you use ChatGPT to write your questions, but if you did, I encourage you to continue exploring that tool. This has been great. Of course, a big thanks to tonight's sponsors, PNC, as well as Erie Insurance, and of course our host site, Gannon University, being here. Folks, we're off for a few days. We're back next week. Details on our website, jeserie.org. Tristan Hoag, back to those two questions. What are you tired of being asked? And maybe another way to frame that is, we should really understand this by now. You wish we got it. And what do you think we're not asking enough of?
So the one question that drives me bananas is, when I get, there's several CIOs I've worked with where Gen AI is my answer to everything. And it doesn't matter what the problem is, they say Gen AI. And it's like, it's going to solve everything. I don't need to put the hard work in. I don't need to develop the skills. I'm like, you're just wrong, right? You may naively believe that's going to work, but they're like, it drives me bananas when they just expect a tool to solve human, real, complicated problems. That one drives me, it infuriates me. And the question I don't get asked enough is, what does this mean for me? What should I be doing? And how do I advance my skill set, my understanding, my commitment, my energy, my focus to make an impact? People talk about their organization, they talk about their team, they talk about what investments to make, but rarely do they ask, what should I do? And ultimately, so much of this for me comes down to your own personal responsibility, your own personal contribution, and what you stand for and what impact you plan to make. And I wish I had that conversation more often with people.
You've got 30 seconds. What does this mean to me, to us? What should we do? Send us off into the night. Personal responsibility, accountability, and use.
Well, I think it's going to be different for every single person. I mean, we're all in different institutions. We're in different roles. But I think effectively, it's can you make an impact in a positive way on the people you care about? Right? To me, that's it.
Mr. Tristan Hoag of Boston Consulting Group X, thank you, folks. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you back at the summit soon. Good night.